Hello again, St. Paul's Geographers, and another video for you today on the measuring of development and how we classify countries by their type of development, what type of country they are. Now, the way we're going to look at this is mostly in terms of a measurement called gross domestic product. And gross domestic product is measured in $1 trillion in this map that we're going to look at today. And gross domestic product considers all of the money from things produced by a country. Okay, so we've got three classifications of these countries, and the more money they make, the more likely they are to be on their pathway to becoming an advanced rich country, whereas the less money they make from products that they control or that they produce themselves through exports and as well as imports, they're going to be have a higher chance of being in the lower categories of low-income developing countries. Now, these classifications that we've seen before, advanced countries, emerging and developing countries, and low-income and developing countries, these are the modern classifications given by the International Monetary Fund. And the International Monetary Fund are a group, organization, we also can call the IMF, who deal with and kind of decide who's going to get certain money from debt relief, who's not going to have to pay the money that they owe, basically, who's going to get money from international development aid or from aid in various different ways, such as multilateral aid from one country to another country. And we're going to consider how we can look at these three types of countries as rich countries and poor countries from the 1980s all the way to 2050. And we're going to consider it by mostly gross domestic product, mostly this kind of measurement, but also through things like, we're going to consider some social factors like war. Have they got war in their country? Have they got access to markets, international markets that are very important? Have they got access to good resources, technology? Have they got a good educational workforce? So a lot of things are going to be something that could help us decide, how developed are they? Where are they on this scale? Okay, now the Brandt line was drawn basically to split the world in two by an international report in the 1980s. Okay, now the Brandt line basically says that all of the countries above it are rich and all of the countries below it are poor. You can see that it stretches mostly across the equatorial line, or just above the equatorial line, the equator, around China, not even considering China as a rich country at the time, but does include Australia as a rich country in the southern hemisphere. So it's kind of our outlier here. Okay, now jump forward about 21 years. We're still finding it difficult to judge where a country fits in these three words. And again, we look at a number of things. We look at these factors. We look at the amount of money that it makes. But we're constantly coming up with new groups of countries that are either in the future going to be incredibly rich, have already made a lot of progress, or are going to be some of the fastest growing economies by that time. Now, in 2001, BRICS was introduced by the IMF. They basically identified a group of countries that they thought by 2050 that these countries would be the greatest economies in the world. Okay, and they are, or some of the greatest economies in the world at the time: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So we're considering these to be, by 2050, they're going to be some of the largest economies in the world. And then we have these things called MINT countries. And MINTs were identified by the IMF in 2014. And MINTs are Mexico, got Indonesia, a few countries that we've heard of and seen some case studies from before. Nigeria, we've looked at before. And Turkey, which we've looked a lot at because it's an entire case study that we have. So these four countries, identified in 2014, are considered to be some of the fastest growing economies by 2050. And again, we're going to have some data that we can compare that to. And we're going to compare it to 2012. I'm going to show you a few countries from these two brackets, and I'm going to consider a few advanced countries as well, so that we take a few things into account. And then you're going to have some tasks. You're going to do your quiz. You're going to have some tasks in the cluster, and hopefully that will kind of help you get a little bit of a better understanding and play around with the data a little bit more and make explanations on the data that we have. Kind of draw these conclusions of whether or not resources have been the reason for a country having a very fast growing economy or not. So we're going to start with some of our BRIC countries, or BRICS. So by 2050, compared to 2012, we're going to look at Brazil. And Brazil, in 2012, using this measurement here, it had a $2.25 trillion equivalent economy. And by 2050, it is expected that that will nearly have quadrupled to $9.17 trillion by 2050. Okay? Now this is a jump of being the 7th largest economy by gross domestic product in the world to the 4th. So we've seen a pretty big increase there, as well as a quadrupling of the amount of money that they made. So by 4 their money, or the amount of money that they get from their products. Now why is this the case? Well, let's consider some things about Brazil. It's got excellent resources. You know, it has access to farming, it has access to products like cocoa. So companies like Nestle are going to be really interested in it. It's got forests that are often cut down by multinational companies so that they can set up their companies. It's got a very new road network called the Trans-Amazonian Highway, which connects it to this area here, south of the North American continent, and of course making it accessible to the United States of America. Okay, so by car, by some form of road transport. So there are a lot of reasons why we've got a very fast growing economy, as well as it having been colonized by an advanced country, Portugal, in the past. Okay, now we've got our next country that we're going to look at. We're going to look very quickly at China. And China, in 2012, it was the number 2 economy. In 2012, China had an economy of $8.23 trillion. In 2012, it is expected to have grown by 2050 to become the number 1 economy. We'll just let this figure sink in here. $52.3 trillion is what the 2050 estimation is going to be. So that's going to multiply by almost 8 times, or almost 8 multiplied by its actual 2012 $1 trillion figure for gross domestic product. A lot of reasons for this. China's got excellent resources as well. It's got really good river system, some of the fastest growing cities in the world, like Beijing. And these are just a few reasons, as well as the access to markets like Russia that it has, like India, as well as being able to go through the continent of Asia. So these are markets that it has access to. A lot of port cities, as well as Hong Kong, which is a really rich, independent city, soon to be independent. So we can see reasons why China has a very fast growing economy, and why we consider it to be more developed than other nations, more rich, and have a lot more access to things that people need, like good healthcare, like good education. And also education is one of the important reasons why tech or technology is so important and so up and coming in China. So many big tech industries that end up locating in different parts of the world, creating connections. So Russia and India are countries that you're going to need to go to your textbook to have a look at. Okay, and the textbook pages will be highlighted in the description of the video. Now on to the mints, and mint countries identified in 2014 as some of the fastest growing economies. We're going to look at Mexico. First of all, to start off, and Mexico in 2012, its economy was, in terms of gross domestic product, measured at $1.18 trillion in 2012. And by 2050, it's expected that that will go up to about 6.95 trillion. That's going from the world's 14th largest economy by gross domestic product to the 7th. Pretty big increase as well. Okay, so we can see why we're considering it as one of the fastest growing economies. Reasons for this: very good access to North America, very good access to the United States of America, very large English-speaking population. It has easy access to the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, okay, and as well as this, really good pool of resources available to it in Central and South America. That's just some of the reasons why it has some of the fastest growing cities in the world, like Mexico City, and one of the reasons why it has a lot of businesses that will locate in Mexico. And then finally, an interesting one, Nigeria. Now, Nigeria has one of the fastest growing cities in the world, Lagos, and in 2012 it had a gross domestic product measurement of its economy of $0.26 trillion. So not even $1 trillion, only just a quarter of a trillion. And by 2050, it's expected that this is going to go to $4.91 trillion. It's going to take it from being the 39th largest economy in the world to the 12th largest economy by gross domestic product by 2050. Reasons for this: Nigeria, once colonized by the United Kingdom, by Britain, some infrastructure has been provided to it, but other reasons why it has a huge English-speaking population. It's actually their national language is English, so really good possibility for a lot of companies to come and locate there. It has a lot of resources available to it. It has tropical rainforests nearby. It has access to any country in Africa, and for this reason, as well as it being, not too far away from Europe, it's got quite a strong economy, and by 2050 going to be the 12th largest economy in the world. Of course, there's going to be problems associated with its development, and this is where gross domestic product becomes a bit of an issue. When you consider countries like Mexico and like Nigeria, their cities have a lot of slums in them. So the fact that they've got slums means that they're really underdeveloped parts of the city, hugely problematic for the population, because all the people coming from rural areas, they're going to experience problems like poor health, waste being dumped all along the road in these slums is going to spread disease. So you can see what kind of problem we have if we only measure development by money. But essentially, our main classification that we have at the moment is money, as well as a few other things taken into account in some situations. So please do watch the video. Please consider this visual aspect of development by looking at the map. Fill in the information that we're missing in terms of these 4 countries that I've not given you the data on. Okay, and there'll be a data table for you to fill in to go alongside these tasks, and complete the quiz. Okay, good luck, best of luck.